Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host Leo, and this week we are talking about Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Now, I was planning on doing this eventually. I actually thought about potentially doing it a few weeks ago. But I've decided to do it now because I have a bit of a space to fill, because I am still currently catching up on the challenge. And it's a bit of a rough one. But with that said, though, we can kind of just get straight into it. My history with Wallace and Gromit is fairly simple. It started around the time Curse of the Were-Rabbit came out, in which I watched the original shorts around the same time as we watched the movie on, I think, when Netflix actually had DVDs that went out. I believe we watched it on there. Or we bought the DVD. One of those, I can't fully remember because it was so long ago. Anywho, so that's kind of like the basic of my history. That's kind of my basic history with Wallace and Gromit. As for, my knowledge of the media in general, it's not super extensive, but I probably know more than, I guess, the average. Wallace and Gromit is stop motion and began in 1989 with the short where they go to the moon and eat the moon cheese. There's only like a handful of shorts that they actually did, one of which came out around the same time, if not a little bit later than Curse of the Were-Rabbit, making it, the most recent, that's technically the most recent Wallace and Gromit media. Save for a handful of video games that came out between then and now, as well as the game that's about to come out or is already out for the Meta Quest. That's it. There are some talks of a potential new short or new film coming out. I'm not sure which. They're currently doing it for, I believe it's the 35th. It's either the 30th or the 35th anniversary of Wallace and Gromit. And there's this big, celebration. I'm following them on Instagram to see what happens, if anything at all. We'll see. Now, as for the history of Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit, it was part of a deal between Aardman, the people who make the Wallace and Gromit films, and DreamWorks. Let's just say that they didn't understand stop motion and just how long it would take. But part of that deal came films like Chicken Run and Flushed Away. And I think Early Man might be one of the more recent examples, or maybe it was the pirate one. I think those are all still part of the DreamWorks deal. Maybe. But they signed a deal for X number of films. One of them is completely CGI, that's Flushed Away, while, the rest were proper stop motion. And, yeah, the company kept complaining because it was taking so long, not realizing, stop motion takes forever to do. And it's just one of those funny little things. But yeah, this movie came out and was received relatively well, although the studio kind of considered it a bit of a flop and were quite unhappy with it. But it does follow the same kind of premise as all of the, or at least most of the Wallace and Gromit shorts. The basic premise being Wallace and Gromit are doing some kind of business venture, and one of their inventions fucks up. That's pretty much the simplicity of most of the shorts put into a film. The film is kind of the bare minimum to be feature length. It's only like an hour 38 or so. So it's very simple. In this particular film, though, they are pest control. They go by the name pesto. I don't know entirely why. I think it's just because it's a pun. It's either a pun or pesto is Wallace's last name. I'm not sure. It's what it's kind of hinted at, but I think that the villain just calls him Pesto because he assumes that the name that's his last name. I'm not sure. But anywho, they are running a pest control service in which they are trying to deal with their parishes, where they are trying to deal with their village's rabbit issue in time for the Big Vegetable Festival, in which pretty much everyone in their little town or village is trying their best to grow as big of a vegetable as possible. While out on one of these jobs, we're introduced to the main love interest and main villain of the film. I can't remember their names. I just watched the film, but I can't remember their names. But she wants them dealt with humanely. He wants to just shoot them because he's pretty much Clayton from the Tarzan films. But yeah, they come in with their big old rabbit vacuum, get all the rabbits, and they're like, yeah. But then there's they get an idea from Clayton, or not Clayton. Well, we'll call him Clayton. Why not? He's pretty much Clayton. They get an idea from him to try and change their nature. Because earlier that day, in order to help Wallace along in his diet, he decided to try to use one of his inventions to kind of brainwash himself into enjoying vegetables. But he didn't have enough time to actually try it out. So they journey on to do that job. And while there, they get the idea, well, let's try to combine this vacuum with that, with a little extra moon power, and we'll brainwash the rabbits into not liking vegetables anymore. Good idea, he thinks. But while trying to do that, he accidentally kicks the lever, shooting a rabbit into the helmet, and causing it to have to be destroyed. After the incident, they go to bed, and there's a disturbance in the basement. And that night, the vicar is attacked by a gigantic rabbit. And then the rabbit also goes on a massive, vegetable patch destroying spree. In the morning, all of their alarms are going off, which, by the way that Wallace decides to do his alarm system, while clever, also super fucking creepy. Because basically what he gets is these, professionally done portraits, cuts the eyes out of them like you would see in a Scooby-Doo episode, and puts them over some light bulbs painted to be eyes, so that when an alarm on their property sounds, or when they make a call, their eyes flash so that they know who they're going to, save. Like I said, clever, super fucking creepy. Because in the background, there's just all these faces of, their valued customers. Super creepy. But in this case, when they wake up, all of them are going off. So, there's a town hall meeting to discuss the issue. They blame him for just being shit at his job, but the vicar comes in and says, No, it's a giant fucking rabbit. It's a were-rabbit. People kind of brush him off, but also kind of take him seriously, so they're like, fine. And they all turn to Wallace and say, what are you going to do? And he pretty much says, I'm going to use a giant trap. And everyone goes, good idea. Go do that. That night, him and Gromit go out with a classic Looney Tunes-esque trap of a decoy female were-rabbit, puppeted by Gromit. Wallace gets a bit distracted trying to coach Gromit, that it smacks into a tunnel, and he goes to go retrieve it, but the full moon comes out, and another rabbit attack happens. But Wallace is nowhere to be seen. Gromit, instead, gives chase. He lassos the were-rabbit and is kind of pulled along, goes through a tunnel like made by the rabbit, and tries to keep pace, but ends up losing him. By the time he's able to get the car out, he finds that he's back in their garden. He goes inside to see Wallace trying to manage the chaos from the from the night's attack. And Wallace puts a little bit of the blame on Gromit for having disappeared in the night. But Gromit is following these footprints, and he follows the footprints to the basement, all the way down the stairs, and finds that the rabbit that had gotten stuck in the helmet has changed. It's gotten like longer legs and has become kind of chunkier. When Wallace joins Gromit downstairs, he's like, "Oh, okay, so this is the cause of the issue. This is the were-rabbit. Okay, cool. This is good. Because, sure, we accidentally created a monster, but, bright side, we also have now caught the monster." So, Gromit sets about building a cage for the rabbit to hopefully keep him locked down. And after he finishes with work, he goes upstairs, closes the basement door, locks it, and then notices that the footprints continue on past the basement. So, he follows them up to Wallace's room, where he finds that they're covering Wallace's bed is a bunch of vegetables. And he has gone missing. He has gone to the love interest's house in order to tell her the good news that they have caught the were-rabbit. Gromit rushes to try and intercept him before he ends up causing a lot of damage. Meanwhile, at the love interest's house, Wallace is let in, and it's kind of becoming sunset. She thanks him, takes him up to her secret garden, where she has all these lovely vegetables and whatnot, and he starts to kind of change, but Gromit is able to delay the transformation by pretty much spraying them all with water, I believe. And they leave. On their way out, they are kind of detoured for some reason, and they have to cut through the woods, but there's a tree in their way. Wallace gets out to investigate, and they're jumped by, like we're calling him, Clayton, and his dog. But while Pseudo Clayton is attacking Wallace, Wallace begins to change into the were-rabbit and flings him away, and then flings a giant log out of the way as well. And then away they go. Clayton, or not Clayton, tells the love interest, he lied, but for some reason keeps the fact that Wallace is the were-rabbit a secret, and is just trying to pretty much convince her away from him while making himself look good. He vows to kill the were-rabbit. In the morning, Gromit brings it to Wallace's attention that he is the were-rabbit. Because at this point, Wallace has started to retain some of his rabbitness past the moon. In this case, he has big floppy ears. So, Wallace is still not fully convinced, even though he has big floppy ears now. So Gromit takes him to the other rabbit that they had suspected being the were-rabbit. But he doesn't want vegetables. He wants cheese. because he's becoming more and more like Wallace. So they're kind of it's kind of a fly situation where they kind of slightly melded and are becoming the other one. So they try to rush to figure out a solution. The love interest comes by, says, "Oh, how could you lie to me?" But Wallace isn't mid-transformation at that point, so he's panicking. He ends up accidentally brushing her off, at which then Not Clayton comes to try to kill him using gold bullets because they're 24 karat. That's the only way you can kill a were-rabbit. Puns. They have a mad scramble. Wallace turns into the were-rabbit and flees, but they were using Rabbit Wallace to help build the machine to try to fix it, and so instead Gromit takes Rabbit Wallace and puts him into the van to drive and pretty much act as Wallace in the chase. And they give chase, and it pretty much goes into the big finale where the vegetable festival is underway, but Wallace the were-rabbit is en route to get the vegetables, and Rabbit Wallace is en route to try and help fix it, but is just being a goofball. And Gromit is doing what Gromit does best: everything. Gromit fights Not Clayton's dog, while Not Clayton keeps firing and missing the were-rabbit. It's a big old chase, King Kong-esque ending, roll credits, essentially. Basically, he gets kind of shot with a golden carrot, but is awoken by cheese, and is generally fine. Rabbit Wallace is still Rabbit Wallace. The love interest ends up turning her land into a rabbit sanctuary, where all the rabbits that Wallace and Gromit have caught get to roam free. And that's genuinely it. The stop motion is really good. I mean, come on, it was for the fact that it's a feature-length film, it's big compared to the half-hour shorts that they were doing. Of course, they also kind of got into a nice swing with half-hour shorts because they did, Shaun the Sheep and whatnot. I don't know if they ended up doing Shaun the Sheep fully, or did they do CGI? Not sure. Another upcoming project of theirs is the sequel to Chicken Run. Dawn of the Nugget is what the new movie's called. I'm excited for it. We'll see how it goes. They've recast a lot of the original cast, which is neither here or there, technically. But the big thing for me is whether or not the plot's good. We'll see. Anywho, though, with that said, I would absolutely recommend Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit. It's especially if you're a fan of generally Wallace and Gromit stuff. It's a very fun time and very good movie. Nice and simple, good for you and your kids if you have any. And yeah, like I said, the stop motion is top notch. Didn't really see any errors. No. The only thing that kind of gets a little bit weird is their eyes sometimes, but otherwise it's fine. But with that said, let us go ahead and move on to a relatively short challenge update. Now, I am still catching up. My goal, though, is this week is pretty much going to be the Magnus Chase week. This week I am going to push everything I can into just reading all 3 Magnus Chase books and finishing it all and catching up. That way I can move on to, I think it's Serpent Shadow, and from then I should hopefully have the last book in so that we can finish off this challenge in, I guess, a lot more gripping a way than I was expecting to. As for the books, I have found that I absolutely hate the Kane Chronicles books. Now, you might be thinking, what? When you last read a Kane Chronicles book, you said you hated it then too. Yes, but my hope for this book was that it was going to improve. You know, because that's generally how it goes, is they tend to get a little bit better with time, with any luck. In this case, it started off promising with the mention that, Sadie was supposedly losing her British accent. I was like, okay, cool, that's one of my biggest issues kind of resolved, hopefully. No, they kind of just delayed it a bit before just going back to her having the accent and saying stupid lines here, there, and everywhere for no real reason. And then I had also forgotten the number one reason I didn't like it was that I hate the characters and their relationships and their motivations. So yeah. Yeah, no, I just found I really, really don't like it. And luckily, I'm done with the second book, so now I get to move on with Magnus Chase, which so far has been much better. Though I will say that it seems slightly confused about, what it's doing. I think it's just because this is the first book. It's the introductory book, so it's going to take a little bit of time to fully get into it. But besides, the general Percy Jackson issues of its timeline is fucked, it just kind of, I don't know. It hasn't established what its goals are, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But it's getting there. Where I'm at currently, they've just started the quest proper, which is to get the Sword of Summer, stop Surt, prevent Ragnarok. And so far, they haven't done anything. They're about to get lunch. But it's pretty good, and I like the concept of, hey, he died. It tells you straight up at the beginning of the book, he's gonna die. And he does. He's dead. Now, why he doesn't... See, so he is the cousin of Annabeth Chase, Percy Jackson's girlfriend, lead counselor of the Athena cabin. Now, she is here. This is the family emergency that's mentioned at the beginning of Trials of Apollo. And she is there trying to find him. Now, the reason that she's trying to find him is that his uncle, Randolph, has been looking for him and has called in his brother, Frederick, which is, I guess, Annabeth's dad's name, which I either didn't remember or this is new information. But yeah. Anywho, they're there looking for him. And one of the things is, after he dies, he spends some time in Valhalla, and then when he comes back to Midgard, he is looking for his body, and he finds it in a funeral home. And for some reason, Annabeth's there. Why? Doesn't really explain why she's there, because the funeral services aren't until that night, and the funeral home is supposed to be closed. But she's there for some reason, and she confronts him, and she kind of starts to come to the conclusion that he is part of the potentially Greek mythology. At least that's kind of the assumption that we get based off of her reaction. But for some reason, after coming to this realization, doesn't explain that she is also the child of a god. To help, give him the understanding that he needs to be able to tell her what's been going on. Because she's like, oh, I knew you didn't die. And he's like, well, because he's literally staring at his dead body. So yeah. But anywho, they separate with the promise of, you know, meeting up later to discuss their issues. And that's so far the last we've seen of her. I know she makes an appearance at the end of the book, but I need to get to it. But yeah, that's kind of the episode this week, because that's pretty much where I'm at. It's pretty good. Like I said, just some issues so far with, you know, why they're beating around the bush with some things, when, like, you think Annabeth by this point would just be like, oh yeah, so this explanation. Instead, it's just him hawing around and then just puttering off. It's no, boo. But yeah, so my goal, my plan, like I said, this next week I'm going to just Magnus chase it up. I'm gonna finish this book tomorrow. That is my plan. That's all I'm going to do. Is tomorrow, Monday, when this episode releases, I am going to finish the book. Then Tuesday, or hell, even tomorrow, I'm going to begin the next book and, you know, just pull through. Luckily, each book gets shorter as it goes. I need to try and get all 3 of these books finished. I want to say by Friday, ideally. So it's going to be another massive push week, and luckily I'm getting my sleep schedule kind of balanced enough to where it's becoming feasible for me to do that. Because lately I've been waking up so late to where it feels like I just can't. But luckily I've been able to balance it out a little bit to where I should be able to get up, read huge chunks, and then take a break here or there. As for other content that I'm supposed to be working on, I will still take a short break to get the Pirates of the Caribbean episode recorded for this week. And I will also, depending on how good I'm doing in the books, I might stream, but it might have to wait until Sunday. Or streaming in general might also have to wait until the challenge is finished. I don't know at this moment. We'll see how it goes this week. I've been really wanting to stream more Spider-Man, and when I stream again, it will be a lot of Spider-Man for a good chunk of time. But I already have the thumbnails made and everything. I'll probably sometime later make the thumbnails for the Miles Morales portions. But yeah, you know, I'm excited for stuff. I want to make more stuff. It's just I'm stuck reading a lot of stuff. And as for watching the stuff for this show, it's not the easiest with trying to catch up, because I end up getting kind of caught in analysis paralysis, where I'm like, oh, I should be doing this, but I also should be doing that if I want to do this by this time. You know, like I had identified like 3 different things I could do for this week's episode, and I ended up doing none of them. I did Wallace and Gromit because it was the shortest thing I could find. Because I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll do Conan the Barbarian, but I kind of want to do all the Conan stuff together, and to do that, I need to be able to read the first book. So that has to wait. Oh, I could do the first season of the Doctor Who revival. Yes, I've got part of it watched, just kind of casually, but I haven't been focusing too hard, and I also didn't have enough time today to do that. Then there's also the new season of Gamera, or the new series of Gamera came out. I was like, ooh, I could do that, but it's also like 6 to 8 episodes, so I can't. Then there was another show that I was looking at, like, oh, maybe, but no, because it's a whole show, and I don't have time, because each episode's like an hour. Oh, anyway, that's my little ramble about stuff I want to do. yeah, as for streams, I'll try to maybe fit one in this week, but realistically, I have to sit down and just crunch through these books as hard as I can. And luckily, it's, I'm not starting from zero. I'm already almost halfway through the first book. It's just taking some time. I'm literally, after I finish recording this and get it edited down a little bit, because it's going to be a relatively short episode as is, I'm going to go straight into reading. It, should be fine. But we'll go ahead and leave it there for this week. Next week, I might do the first season of Doctor Who, just to, get it in as a hook. Because then I'll have 13 potential episodes there. Isn't that great? Or more. Because there's also the new Doctor Who that's coming out, I think sometime next year? Anywho. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys liked this, please feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Or rate and review it on your podcast app of choice. Share it with your friends. All that kind of fun stuff. But with that said, thank you guys again for listening. I will talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.